7 years into my marriage, my husband had taken a mistress, and today she came to my home claiming I was the third party. She brazenly declared the house hers, flaunting its luxurious decor, which was evidently paid for with my husband's money. They barged in, leaving my home in complete disarray. Meanwhile, my husband threatened me with divorce, coldly saying, "I'm the one running the company now. You're just a housewife with a child. What support will you have after the divorce?" It seemed I needed to prepare for raising my child without a father. After putting my child to sleep, I was about to leave the nursery when a loud knock echoed through the house. The nanny hurried to the door, but before she could identify the visitor, she was shoved aside as a group of people stormed in. The woman leading them glanced around anxiously before giving an order. "Smash everything in here. Let this shameless woman see what she deserves." The group sprang into action, destroying everything in sight. Some even pocketed small valuables. My once orderly home was quickly reduced to chaos. "What are you doing?" the nanny cried out, regaining her composure and attempting to stop them. They responded by pushing her to the ground. Hearing the commotion, I rushed out to see what was happening. The lead woman spotted me immediately, pointed at me, and yelled, "There she is, the shameless mistress who seduced my husband. Watch how I teach her a lesson." A bystander recorded the scene with a phone, aiming the camera directly at my face. "Everyone, take a good look at this homewrecker. Make sure to curse her whenever you see her on the street," they shouted. I swatted the phone away, my eyes scanning the mess in the living room. "Who are you people? Stop this immediately or you'll face the consequences," I warned. Giving the nanny a sharp glance, I silently urged her to call security. The woman sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. "Consequences? Did you consider those when you seduced Daniel Thompson? You've been living off my husband's money, and these things belong to me. This is my house, so I have every right to do as I please." Her words confused me. The Daniel she mentioned was my husband. I had no reason to seduce anyone. I was legally married to him, and we even had a 1-year-old child. They must have the wrong person. I quickly pulled out a photo of our marriage certificate and showed it to her. She glanced at it dismissively, knocked my phone out of my hand, and sneered, "This looks fake. You've been dreaming of being the wife, haven't you? You're just a mistress who won't admit it. Well, today I'll teach you a lesson." My patience snapped as she raised her hand to slap me. I caught her wrist and slapped her back instead, leaving her cheek red and swollen with a clear handprint. She screamed and tried to retaliate, but security arrived in time to intervene. The guards apologized profusely, admitting their negligence in allowing these people to enter, and asked how I wanted to proceed. "Take them to the police station," I instructed. Hearing this, the group panicked and began accusing me. "How dare a mistress like you call the police?" one of them shouted. At the station, they claimed their actions were justified, framing themselves as vigilantes upholding societal justice. I let out a cold laugh, returned to my bedroom, and brought back the actual marriage certificate. Tossing it in front of them, I opened it and said, "See for yourselves. We are a legally married couple. If there's a mistress here, it's you." The group's confidence crumbled instantly. I also presented the police with receipts and records of the destroyed items, demanding full compensation. The total damages amount to several million. My home's cameras have recorded everything, and I can prove who took what. For instance, I added, locking eyes with the lead woman, "You have 3 necklaces and 5 rings in your bag. That qualifies as theft, and I'll be pressing charges for burglary as well." Upon hearing the compensation amount, the group erupted in outrage. "It's just a few broken paintings and old vases. You're clearly exaggerating," one protested. I handed over the receipts and invoices to the police. "These documents detail the exact value of each item," I said. After verification, the police confirmed the accuracy of the claims. Realizing the hefty cost, the group turned on their leader, Rachel. "This is your fault. You said your husband was cheating and asked us to help. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be in this mess. You should take responsibility for the compensation," one of them argued. Rachel, furious at being blamed, shot back, "What do you mean? When I told you about this, you were all eager to jump in and even talked about gaining followers from this. Now that there's money involved, you want to back out? If it weren't for your greed, this wouldn't have happened." The group dissolved into a heated argument, nearly coming to blows. Meanwhile, I handed over the necessary paperwork to the police and left them to handle the situation. I had more pressing matters to address. Rachel knew my home and my husband's name, which could only mean one thing. There was something between her and Daniel. Previously, I had dismissed the possibility of Daniel cheating. But as this confrontation unfolded, my doubts grew stronger, especially with Rachel's precise knowledge. Something had clearly happened between them. 7 years into my marriage, I discovered my husband had taken a mistress, and today she stormed into my home, accusing me of being the other woman. She declared this house hers, flaunting its extravagant decor. Decor obviously paid for with my husband's money. The group she brought with her wreaked havoc, leaving my home in shambles. Meanwhile, my husband threatened me with divorce, his tone icy and dismissive. "I run the company now," he said. "You're just a housewife with a child. What will you have after the divorce?" It became clear I needed to prepare for a future where my child might grow up without a father. After finally putting my child to sleep, I was heading out of the nursery when loud banging startled me. The nanny rushed to answer the door but was shoved aside as a group of strangers forced their way in. The woman leading them scanned the house with a look of entitlement before issuing a command: "Destroy everything." Let this shameless woman learn her lesson. Without hesitation, the group began ransacking my home. They smashed furniture, threw belongings to the floor, and even pocketed small valuables. My orderly house was quickly reduced to chaos. The nanny tried to intervene, shouting, "What are you doing?" But she was pushed to the ground. Hearing the uproar, I hurried out to investigate. The leader of the group immediately spotted me and pointed. "There she is," she shouted. "The shameless mistress who seduced my husband. Watch how I deal with her." Nearby, someone aimed their phone at me, recording the scene. "Take a good look at her face," they yelled. "Make sure you curse her every time you see her on the street." I slapped the phone away and looked around in shock at the mess they had made. "Who are you people?" I demanded. "Stop this immediately or you'll face the consequences." With a glance at the nanny, I silently urged her to call security. The leader sneered, her tone dripping with contempt. "Consequences? Did you think of those when you seduced Daniel Thompson? You've been living off my husband's money, haven't you? These things are mine. This is my house. I can do whatever I want here." Her accusations left me dumbfounded. Daniel was my husband. I had no reason to seduce anyone. I was legally married to him, and we had a 1-year-old child. Could they have mistaken me for someone else? Quickly, I retrieved a photo of our marriage certificate and held it out to her. She glanced at it dismissively, knocked it from my hand, and scoffed. "This looks fake. You've been fantasizing about being the wife, haven't you? You're nothing but a mistress in denial. Today, I'll teach you a lesson." Her words pushed me past my limit. She raised her hand to strike me, but I caught her wrist mid-swing and slapped her across the face instead. Her cheek reddened instantly, bearing the mark of my hand. She screamed, lunging at me, but by then, security had arrived to intervene. They quickly restrained her and her group. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," one guard said apologetically. "We should have stopped them at the gate. How would you like to handle this?" "Take them to the police station," I instructed without hesitation. The group panicked upon hearing this, resorting to insults. "How dare you, a mistress, call the police on us?" one shouted defiantly. At the station, they brazenly claimed they were acting in the name of justice, punishing a so-called mistress. I left the room momentarily and returned with my marriage certificate. Tossing it onto the table, I opened it. "Look closely," I said. "We're legally married. If anyone here is a mistress, it's you." Their bravado faltered. Turning to the police, I produced receipts and invoices for the damaged items, demanding full compensation. "The total damages amount to several million," I stated. "My home's security cameras recorded everything. I can identify who took what. For example," I said, directing my gaze at the leader, "you have 3 necklaces and 5 rings in your bag. That's theft, and I'll be pressing charges for burglary." The mention of the compensation sum caused an uproar. "It's just a few broken paintings and vases," one of them shouted. "You're inflating the value." Calmly, I handed the receipts to the officers. "These documents detail the exact value of each item," I said. After verifying the paperwork, the police confirmed my claims were accurate. Realizing the financial consequences, the group turned on their leader, Rachel. "This is all your fault," one of them yelled. You said your husband was cheating and asked us to help you. Now we're in trouble because of you. You should pay for the damages. Rachel, angered by their accusations, shot back. What do you mean? You all rushed to join me when I suggested this. You even talked about gaining followers from this scandal. Now that money's involved, you're trying to back out? Don't blame me for your own greed. Their argument escalated into shouting, with accusations flying back and forth. I ignored their bickering, handed the necessary documents to the police, and left the station. I had more pressing matters to address. Rachel knew not only my address, but also my husband's name. This wasn't a coincidence. It strongly suggested a connection between her and Daniel. Though I had dismissed the idea of Daniel cheating, the events of the day made it impossible to ignore. Something had clearly happened between them. I was busy managing the company, and as long as Daniel's affairs didn't directly interfere with my work or life, I chose to ignore them. To demonstrate his loyalty when he moved in, Daniel had signed a prenuptial agreement promising that if he cheated after marriage, he would leave with nothing. Now that our child was born, I needed to focus on inheritance matters as a priority. Not long after the vandalism at my house, my best friend Sarah called to check on me. It had been a while since we last spoke, and I didn't expect her to reach out. When I told her I had sent the intruders to the police and demanded compensation, she sounded shocked. Then she said something unexpected. Emily, your family doesn't have any major problems, right? You're so wealthy, and those people are clearly struggling. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Why not forgive them? Her words left me both angry and amused. Sarah, what are you saying? I asked. I'm the victim here. I warned them to stop before they destroyed my home. Was I the one who forced them to act like this? If you feel so strongly about it, why don't you go carve the long giant Buddha instead? Sarah's tone became indignant. Emily Smith, how could you say that? If your family wasn't so rich, they wouldn't have done this. If you don't let this go, I'm cutting ties with you. Her statement left me stunned. I couldn't believe she was siding with strangers and blaming me. Sarah, don't lecture me about victim blaming, I snapped. Their choices are their own responsibility. If you sympathize with them so much, why don't you pay their compensation yourself? Without waiting for a response, I hung up and blocked her number, ending our decade-long friendship. A few days later, I finally uncovered evidence confirming my suspicions. Daniel had been cheating for a long time, and he wasn't seeing just one woman. To my shock, Sarah turned out to be one of his long-term lovers. And she even had a child with him, only a few months younger than mine. It all made sense now. No wonder I hadn't seen her for months. She had been pregnant. Around this time, I received a call from the police station. The intruders from my house wanted to speak with me. Curious, I agreed to meet them. Standing behind the protective railing, I asked them flatly, have you worked out the compensation, or do you have something else to say? After some hesitation, Rachel, the ringleader, spoke up. Someone gave us your address and encouraged us to confront you. If you want to know who it was, we can negotiate on the compensation. I scoffed. The amount you owe isn't small, so I can only consider partial leniency. The rest will have to be paid in installments. If you're unwilling, I'll find out the truth myself. Faced with no better options, Rachel grudgingly admitted, it was Sarah. She gave us your address and told us to settle accounts with you. She said she couldn't stand what you were doing and didn't want you to be kept in the dark. This revelation wasn't surprising. Rachel didn't realize Sarah was also one of Daniel's lovers. She likely thought Sarah was just a kind-hearted woman trying to do the right thing. However, Sarah underestimated how people like Rachel, pushed to desperation, would retaliate. I confirmed my suspicions and replied, did you know Sarah is also a mistress? She's been seeing Daniel longer than you have, and they even have a child together. To drive the point home, I pulled out a photo of Daniel, Sarah, and their baby, showing it to Rachel. Take a good look. Sarah is perfectly fine while you're drowning in debt, abandoned by your so-called friends. Rachel's face turned crimson with anger as she processed the betrayal. I left her to stew in her emotions, curious to see how they would clash moving forward. According to my investigation, Daniel had genuine feelings for Sarah despite his numerous affairs. She was his longest-standing lover and the one he treated best. Sarah's gentle personality made her stand out. She never caused drama, even though she knew about the other women in his life. In contrast, Daniel kept the other women unaware of each other. Daniel had even bought Sarah a house in the city center comparable to mine. Whatever Sarah wanted, He provided without hesitation. However, as Daniel was merely an employee at my company, his salary couldn't possibly support such lavish expenses. It was clear he had been embezzling or mismanaging funds. As the rightful owner of the company, it was time I stepped in to ensure he didn't confuse my assets for his own. When Daniel returned from a business trip, he appeared concerned, asking if I was okay. His performance might have convinced me if I didn't already know his true nature. I assured him I was fine, but he quickly shifted gears. Emily, I heard you sent those people to jail. Since you're unharmed, why not let them go? Don't waste police resources. I shot him a sharp look. What if I don't want to? Daniel's expression grew tense. Why argue with them? Be generous, it's the right thing to do. Think of it as setting a good example for the baby. His attempt to manipulate me only made me laugh. Am I being petty? Or do you care because someone important to you is involved? I asked pointedly. Daniel's face stiffened. What nonsense are you talking about? He said defensively. I didn't back down. Do you really think I haven't noticed what you've been doing? I threw a folder of photos onto the table, each showing him in compromising situations with different women. Daniel tried to defend himself, claiming it was all for work. You wouldn't understand. Entertaining clients sometimes requires going the extra mile. Does going the extra mile include sharing a bed? I countered coldly. Cornered, Daniel dropped his pretense. Fine. If you already know everything, then let's not pretend anymore. If you don't release Rachel, we're getting a divorce. I'm managing the company now, and you're just a housewife. What will you have after the divorce? His words were a clear threat, banking on the assumption I wouldn't leave him. But he underestimated me. All right, I said evenly. Let's divorce. Daniel had always believed I was hopelessly in love with him, convinced he had total control over me. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I had Daniel sign a prenuptial agreement before we got married, and he didn't object at the time. What he didn't realize was that all I valued about him were his genetics. When I was preparing to take over the company, some questioned my ability, arguing that as an unmarried woman without children, I might struggle to balance family life with managing a business. Daniel, a top scorer in his college entrance exams and a handsome, devoted man at the time, seemed like the perfect partner for the image I needed. Once I successfully took over the company, I dealt with anyone who doubted me. Now that my goals were accomplished, Daniel was no longer useful. Daniel was stunned when I told him I wanted a divorce. Emily, think carefully. You'll have nothing after the divorce, he warned, clearly surprised by how easily I agreed. I stood up and turned to the nanny. Linma, escort him out. Daniel, visibly shocked, protested. This is my home. You can't kick me out. I laughed. Don't forget, I bought this house before we married, and it's in my name. This is my house, and I'm filing for divorce. You can either leave willingly or have security throw you out. Prideful as always, Daniel refused to stay where he wasn't wanted. Emily, you'll regret this. You'll beg me to come back. He spat before storming out. But I knew the only person who'd end up begging would be him. Although I bailed Rachel out of jail, it wasn't out of sympathy. I had other plans for her. During my investigation, I discovered that Rachel had also been wronged by one of Daniel's mistresses. Her ex-boyfriend had cheated on her, deepening her resentment toward mistresses. She was now tangled in a web of jealousy and bitterness, which I intended to use to my advantage. Once released, Rachel went straight to Sarah's house. To further escalate matters, I sent intimate photos of Sarah and Daniel to his other lovers. A woman's jealousy can be a powerful force, especially when she discovers her loyal boyfriend has been cheating. Sarah, being shrewd, had always managed to establish friendly relationships with Daniel's other flings, cleverly keeping his attention on her. But this time, Rachel wasn't one to be manipulated. Later, I brought a group of bodyguards to Sarah's house. When she opened the door and saw me, she was momentarily speechless, her flushed face and disheveled hair betraying signs of a recent altercation with Rachel and the others. Emily, what are you doing here? She asked awkwardly. I gave her a faint smile. I came to inspect the house Daniel bought for you. Turning to my bodyguards, I ordered, smash everything. The bodyguards pushed past Sarah and began wrecking the house. Sarah screamed, Emily, stop. Tell them to stop. She tried to grab one of the men, but her nanny stood frozen, too frightened to intervene. The sharp cries of a baby echoed from another room, further intensifying Sarah's panic. She glared at me as though I were her worst enemy and tried to strike me, but I easily deflected her attempt. Aren't you the one who despises mistresses the most? I'm just helping you teach one a lesson, I said with a cold smile. Her face turned pale, but she stubbornly replied, I don't know what you're talking about. I gently patted her cheek. Rachel said your good days are over. Enraged, Sarah screamed at her nanny, Call the police! She broke into my house! At the police station, Sarah angrily accused me of trespassing and destruction. This crazy woman smashed my things. Arrest her, she demanded. The officers initially seemed sympathetic to her plight. One of them asked me sternly, Why did you do this? Feigning confusion, I replied, I was just dealing with my property. Is that a crime? Sarah, furious, shouted, This is my house. I smirked. Actually, it's not. Daniel bought this house using marital funds, which makes it mine as well. Every item in your home was paid for with his money, and I can handle my belongings as I see fit. I then presented the evidence I had prepared, our marriage certificate and financial records proving my claim. The officers' attitudes shifted immediately. Sarah, who had appeared so confident, now looked flustered. She tried to argue, If you couldn't keep your man, that's your fault. The unloved one is the mistress. The officers only issued me a warning and let me go. As I left the station, Daniel was waiting outside. Sarah ran into his arms, sobbing dramatically. Daniel, look at what she did, she wailed. Turning to me, Daniel said coldly, Emily, you've gone too far this time. Apologize and we'll forget this ever happened. I couldn't help but laugh. You're overestimating yourself. Even though we're divorcing, this house is still under my control. I've already arranged for Sarah's belongings to be packed and stored in the security office. Feel free to pick them up. Ignoring their stunned expressions, I walked away. The next day, Daniel returned to work, only to find movers clearing out his office. What's going on here? He demanded. The staff hesitated but explained, These are Emily's instructions. You've been dismissed. Fuming, Daniel stormed into my office. Emily, what is this? Why are my things being moved? I'm the vice president. You can't fire me. Feigning surprise, I replied, The announcement was posted in the company chat group. Didn't you see it? Scrolling through his phone, his face darkened. You can't do this. I'm the vice president. I met his anger with calm indifference. Not anymore. I twirled the pen in my hand, leaning back as I watched Daniel with calm indifference. In this company, I hold the real authority, I said coolly. Do I need anyone's permission to dismiss an employee? Daniel's face turned a deep shade of red. Emily, what is the meaning of this? He barked. Are you divorcing me to get revenge? Do you think this is some sort of payback? Feigning surprise, I replied with a faint smile. You're overestimating yourself. Divorcing you is nothing monumental. I don't have the time or energy to seek revenge. I'm simply clearing out the company's dead weight. Daniel's face flushed with anger as he shouted, Emily, I've sacrificed so much for this company while you've been busy having babies. If it weren't for me, the company wouldn't be where it is today. What gives you the right to treat me like this? My tone turned cold. And do you think having a child is something I did on my own? I added flatly, I've had the company accounts reviewed, and discrepancies have come to light. Discrepancies that occurred under your watch. Either you were negligent or you were complicit. You are no longer an employee here. Leave immediately. Daniel attempted to argue, but security intervened and forcibly escorted him out. His protests echoed through the building. Later, during a company meeting, the door to the conference room flew open. Daniel stormed in and demanded, Why was I not notified about this meeting? I met his glare with an icy look. This is an internal meeting. Non-company personnel have no business here, he scoffed. You can't decide that, Emily. The other shareholders have already agreed to transfer their shares to me. I'll soon be the largest shareholder with veto power. I can have you removed from the company anytime I want. He stood there confidently, expecting me to be rattled. Unfazed, I scanned the faces of the shareholders around the table, noting how none of them dared to meet my gaze. I replied calmly, I'd love to know which shareholders agreed to this. The room fell silent. Not a single person spoke in his defense. Daniel's once proud expression began to falter. In truth, I had already been tipped off about his attempts to persuade the shareholders. While his promises had initially seemed enticing, these seasoned investors prioritized tangible returns over empty guarantees. After consulting with me, they decided to feign cooperation with Daniel to buy time while remaining loyal to me. A shareholder finally broke the silence, saying, "That's not true, Daniel. We fully support Emily." Another added, "Yes, Emily's leadership has been instrumental to the company's success. She has our unwavering support." Before Daniel could respond, a knock at the door interrupted the meeting. Two police officers entered, asking, "Who is Daniel?" He stepped forward impatiently. "That's me. What's this about?" The officers restrained him. "You're under investigation for financial crimes. Please come with us." Daniel's face turned pale. "You've got the wrong person," he protested, his voice frantic. His eyes darted around the room before locking on me. "It's Emily. She's framing me," he shouted. The officers remained firm. "The evidence is conclusive. Cooperate with the investigation." They led a struggling Daniel out of the room. I had begun investigating the funds Daniel used to purchase Sarah's house. Given his salary, he couldn't afford such extravagant expenses, especially with his spending on other mistresses. A thorough audit of the company's accounts revealed that he had been embezzling funds. If I hadn't uncovered his actions, the company could have faced financial ruin. While Daniel was in custody, I expedited our divorce proceedings. Sarah eventually bailed him out, but his prior misdeeds had drained him financially. The house he bought for Sarah was reclaimed as part of the restitution for the company, forcing the two of them to move into her modest old apartment, a stark contrast to their former lifestyle. Their fall from grace was swift. Less than a week after his release, Daniel and Sarah caused a commotion at the company lobby. My assistant notified me, and when I arrived, I found Sarah arguing with the security guard, holding her child. Her previously elegant demeanor had vanished. As soon as Sarah saw me, she charged past security. "Emily, even though you and Daniel are divorced, we need to settle the asset distribution," she said indignantly. "You slandered Daniel, got him jailed, and ruined us. You owe us compensation. Hundreds of thousands." I couldn't help but laugh. Did Daniel fail to mention the prenuptial agreement he signed? If he cheated, he gets nothing. He still owes money to the company. What assets do you think you're entitled to? Her face froze, but she pressed on. What about my son? He's Daniel's son. Your daughter can't inherit the company. A woman can't run it. Give my son a monthly allowance of $100,000 and he'll take over the company when he grows up. I replied coldly. Is your son mine? The heir to my company isn't for you to decide. Child support? That's your problem, not mine. Sarah's face turned pale. I added pointedly, Are you even sure the child is Daniel's? Her expression twisted in panic. In truth, the child wasn't Daniel's. She had used Daniel's wealth to support her ex-boyfriend, with whom she had the child. This revelation planted a seed of doubt in Daniel, leading him to conduct a DNA test. When the results confirmed the child wasn't his, Daniel was livid. A heated argument between them escalated, and in his rage, Daniel pushed Sarah down the stairs. He fled the scene and went into hiding. Meanwhile, Sarah's reputation was destroyed. Her family, embarrassed by the scandal, disowned her. Alone and abandoned, she was left to fend for herself. With Daniel arrested and Sarah out of the picture, I refocused on my work. The company flourished, eventually going public. Balancing my professional success, I made sure to spend quality time with my daughter, embracing a more joyful and balanced life.